to discuss today the situation and the war in Lebanon, which is a very important topic for us to shed attention upon, attention which is unfortunately minimal in many of the European audience and worldwide audiences. It's very important for us to discuss this matter at hand. I'm very thankful to our speakers here joining us, who I will introduce in a bit. Also, thank you, audience, for joining here. We'll take this webinar around 45 minutes to an hour. Good to know is that we also have a Q&A, so you can just post questions you want to our speakers here to answer in the chat, and I will pose them to them as well. Welcome, Riwa Grawi. You're an activist and co-founder of the Green Wave Lebanon initiative. Thank you so much for joining. And also,
thank you for having me.
Thanks. And Jad Fayyad, you're the international coordinator for the Progressive Youth Organization. You're currently both also in Lebanon. Thank you so much for joining at this very difficult time for the country. Maybe to already just delve into the questions and to start with you, Riwa, if that's okay, is maybe to start off with the context and about Lebanon that has been dragged into the war in Iran as well. It has turned into a regional conflict, but of course, Lebanon has been under fire for already years also after all the crimes that happened by Israel in Gaza. Can you maybe describe the key events in Lebanon since the beginning of March 26? So what has happened since March 26 in concordance, of course, the US and Israeli war that they've started also in Iran? Thanks.
Of course. I would say the current phase officially began on the 2nd of March 2026, when Hezbollah launched the cross-border attacks after the killing of Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. But I also want to be clear on everyone's role in these escalations. And this will require a quick look at 2024, and specifically from the 23rd of September 2024, which was described at the time by Reuters as Lebanon's deadliest day in decades, with over 490 people killed and 1,600 wounded in one day alone. The hostilities continued until the 27th of November 2024, when a ceasefire entered into force, and by then, 3,900 people were killed and about 16,000 were injured. I want to be clear on this so that the escalations today are not considered in isolation. At the time, 1.2 million people were displaced and 100,000 homes were damaged or destroyed. Since the ceasefire, the UN Human Rights Office has verified that Israeli strikes have killed, since the ceasefire, at least 127 civilians in Lebanon. So now that we move back to March 2nd, 2026, Hezbollah launches cross-border attacks in response to the killing of the supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, and the Prime Minister, Nawaf Salam, responds by the immediate prohibition of all Hezbollah security and military activities as being outside of the law. And basically obliging it to hand over its weapons to the Lebanese state and ending visa-free entry into Lebanon. For Iranians, which was later followed by the expelling of Iran's ambassador, and this is now a matter of time until we see if it happens or not. And all of this indicates that the Lebanese state itself rejected being dragged into this war. So Israel's response then escalated into a nationwide campaign, basically, of bombardment, repeated evacuation orders, and attacks on bridges and civilian infrastructure that effectively isolated the area south of the Litani River. And this area, it consists of about 850,000 square kilometers. In total, about 20% of Lebanon's territory has been displaced, and about 150,000 people right now remain isolated in the south of Lebanon. So now this is where this gets pretty dangerous, because increasingly explicit statements are coming up, such as from the defense minister Israel Katz, who said on the 24th of March that Israel intends to hold a security zone, right? So now that there's talk of the security strip, and there's also the finance minister, Smotrich, who claimed the new Israeli border must be the south of Litani. We're also talking about possibility of annexation of Lebanese land. So in less than a month, these are the damages that we're looking at. Perhaps Jad would want to add to this.
Yeah, yeah, most probably, and indeed, it's already a good introduction. I already see the escalation and how far even there could be escalated from the Israeli side after everything and all the crimes that has happened across the region. But even in that case, also talking indeed about annexation, also colonists already, I think, crossed also the border in some elements. So I think that's also something we would like to, yeah, discuss also more. And Jad, what's your take on this? And can you maybe also tell a bit about the yeah, what has happened indeed since March 26th, but also how it affected the humanitarian situation across Lebanon, so in southern Lebanon, but also across the country. Many people, of course, fleeing now for the violence.
First of all, thank you for hosting me. Rewa just did a great introduction regarding what's happening in Lebanon. I just would like to add that hundreds of thousands of people are displaced now. Many of them are living in tents. Others are just living in some schools or some places they just rent. But it's a very dramatic uh, dramatic situation in Lebanon. You know that those people do not know when would they come back to their homes, and do not know if that they will find their homes when the war just ends, because Israel is just destroying and damaging everything in the south and everything in the southern suburb of Beirut, the Dahiya Janubiyya, and it's even targeting some civilians and some places far from the south and from far from Dahiya. They just hit Beirut, Bekaa, and even the mountain of Lebanon. So Israel just isn't sparing any region in Lebanon. They are damaging, destroying, killing, and what's happening is just crazy, because they are not separating, or they are not. Yes, they are not separating between Hezbollah and civilians. This is one important point. The second important point is that Hezbollah just entered this war, as Riwa mentioned, to support Iran, and يعني, regard or during the on Iran's time, or on Iran's clock. So they just entered this war, and the Israel did not stop, by the way, bombing Lebanon since 2024, but it was just a specific or يعني, some bombs every day. Now it is an open war between Hezbollah and Israel.
And if I may add to this on the humanitarian consequences and toll that it has taken on Lebanon, because I was looking at some statistics before joining this meeting, and I think the numbers are just staggering. I mean, Reuters reported as of 25th of March, so exactly 2 days ago, that more than 1 million people have been displaced. Actually, the estimates go up to 1.2 million, of which 370,000 are actually children, according to UNICEF. And of those killed, 121 are children, 79 are women, and 399 are injured children. In a country as small and fragile as Lebanon, this is a national shock. This tells you how this war is being fought, because Lebanon does not have an air defense system. And so these strikes, they hit very hard. And I would also like to add something. 64 attacks on healthcare facilities and staff. These have resulted in 51 workers killed and 91 injured. So this is not only an attack on Lebanon in itself, but also on the infrastructure of survival in Lebanon.
Yeah, thank you, Jad. Thank you, Riva. And yeah, how do you see the current tactics from Israel in comparison to, of course, the ongoing attacks since 2020, 2024? Is this at this time, is it much more worse? And are there different tactics being deployed, or is it in a similar fashion as happened since 2024? What's your take on that? Maybe Jad, to start with you.
Okay. The dangerous point this time is that the Israelis are trying to separate the south from the whole country. They are trying to invade the whole south, and as Riwa mentioned, Smotrich, the finance minister in Israel, said that the borders must be on the Litani River. So this is a very important point. They are damaging everything in the south, and trying to make a buffer zone or whatever, just a place that there are no people, there are no buildings, there are no even trees or or nature, and they are just firing everything and destroying everything. This is a very important point we have to say, because hundreds of thousands of people are living there, so they won't be able to go back, first of all. Second, Israel is annexing around 30 to 40% of Lebanon, and they are taking this part into, and no one secures that Israel will go back to its original borders or to the occupied Palestinian borders. So this is a very important point. Other than that, we can mention that the war is escalating, and there are no, there are no political movement in order to put this war, to end this war. Israel is just rejecting every diplomatic and every political solution, and they are just saying that they will destroy Hezbollah and they will continue in their war. So there are no diplomatic solutions, and that's what really scares, because the war might be open and it might take a lot of time, and this is another important point.
Thank you. Riva, do you have something to add here?
No, Najat pretty much covered all of it. If anything, perhaps I would echo a few points. The military campaign this time is not only about displacing people. We're also noticing the degrading of conditions that are needed to maintain civilian life. So, for instance, the destruction of key bridges, effectively isolating the south, right? Cutting off entire districts in the south, isolating the people living in the south. I think the estimated number of people who are still there is about 150,000. I'm not really sure about this, but it tells you about how people there are being cut off from basically humanitarian assistance and basically the very conditions that are needed for survival. It feels like there's an entire section of Lebanon that is being isolated from the rest of it. And the public discourse, the narrative, is already starting to back this up. So I think by all definitions of the word, this would be an annexation.
Yeah, exactly. In that sense, and where the Israeli government says it wants to create some kind of buffer zone, but indeed, it constitutes clear crimes against humanity when you're just forcefully displacing people as such. And maybe Riva, I would also be curious because I also saw some reports, and maybe you know more about Orjat, is also about the use of, for example, glyphosate or nature destructing chemicals to just destroy the soil and destroy trees and everything, just to make it in sort of a sense a wasteland, the southern part of Lebanon, indeed to create that buffer zone. Can you maybe comment on that, on those reports?
I think the usage of white phosphorus has been proven and documented, in addition to the uprooting of trees that took place in the last war in 2024. I mean, these are prohibited. I think white phosphorus is not prohibited under international law, but is considered to be very damaging. There is some nuance to it that I'd rather look up before confirming. But all of these are very, very damaging substances that are meant to inflict harm on soil and on people, and that are being used. And I don't think nearly enough attention is being given to this, because the nature of the soil itself is becoming damaged, in addition to the damages that it inflicts upon people. I mean, white phosphorus burns through the skin without being turned off with water. And you can imagine the kind of damages that it causes. This is generational damage that is being caused to the soil.
Yeah, to the soil and to the people. It's something that indeed it will is a complete, will take so much time to recover. Jad, do you have anything to comment on that?
In addition to that, yes, just ruining the agriculture there is it's a political, by the way, it's a political move, because they are, or a socio-economic move, because they are preventing people to go back to their lands and to plant their lands and to live from their lands, because people in the south live through agriculture. Burning those trees and throwing phosphorus and whatever on the land will prevent them to go back to their lands and live there. So it's not just ruining what is now. They are destroying the land there for the upcoming years.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks. And indeed, something there should be much more attention on this, next to the whole situation and everything Israel is doing in Lebanon. But this is also such a clear violation of so many human rights and everything that it's a horrible situation. So maybe to continue, we also have some questions from the Q&A coming in. I will pose them to you in a bit, but maybe first, still keeping the discussion on situation in Lebanon before also going to the international side of things, can you maybe tell a bit more on how Lebanon's government and political parties responded to the war and especially the aggravation and the increasing violence since March 26? Shall I give the word to you, Riva, first?
Of course. I think the Lebanese government's response has been unusually explicit. Prime Minister Nawaf Salama said that Lebanon should not be dragged into this war by Hezbollah and that decisions of war and peace belong to the state. I think statements like these are quite new under the new government. And his government has also declared Hezbollah's military activities as illegal, demanding disarmament and ending visa-free entry for Iranians, as I have mentioned earlier. These are pretty strong assertions, but we're yet to see the implications in a war with massive power imbalance. I think it's worth noting that that Lebanon's internal divisions have also deepened with this. I mean, with over 1 million people displaced, mostly from Shia areas, moving into regions denominated by other communities, there are undeniable tensions and fears. So I believe the government's response is also trying to do two things at once, like reasserting sovereignty internally in a sense, but also trying to resist externally. So, but again, with this power imbalance, I believe it is a very difficult position for the government to be in. So we have seen some pretty strong statements, but also in terms of implementation, I believe the government is being a bit delicate with its approach, and we're yet to see what comes next. Jad, what do you think?
Yes, I agree, and I just have to mention one additional point is that neither the cabinet nor Hezbollah do have emergency plans for displaced people. Some parties are just doing their job and holding their responsibilities, and some other parties aren't doing that. But we have to mention that the government and the cabinet weren't ready for this war. They do not have any emergency plans to host the displaced people, so they just opened the schools in the regions, but they could not afford the food, neither every daily life equipment. So this is an important point. The NGOs are just helping in this issue. Hezbollah is helping in a way or another, but it's not enough. The cabinet is trying to do whatever it can make, but even though it's not that enough. I have to mention one important point is that the president of our party, Walid Jumlat, just contacted the Turkish presidency, and through the government and through the cabinet, they might secure some plastic houses for people that are living in tents and on the streets. But it's not that there is no emergency plan in order to take care of all those displaced people, that they are more than 1 million, as Rewa mentioned, and maybe 1.2 million.
Yeah, which is a huge number in Lebanon, of course. In comparison to how many people are living in Lebanon. So it's completely shakes up, of course, everything. And are most people?
It's about 20 to 25% of the Lebanese population.
Yeah, exactly. So that's huge. And it's of course very difficult to also and even impossible to plan on so many people being fleeing from war and violence. Are most people currently fleeing to the north of Lebanon?
Across Lebanon. So I would say that the route that they have taken is mostly towards the north, but a lot of them have actually settled in Beirut, while there are some shelters that have opened closer to Tripoli and Akkar. And that, at least for the shelters that have been opened by the government, I know that some movement has taken place a bit more to the north, but people have really been quite dispersed all over the place.
Okay, thanks. Clear.
I just have to mention that one more point is that around hundreds of thousands of displaced people are in the mountain right now. in the Mount of Lebanon.
Okay, yeah, so that's also a region where a lot of people fled to. So maybe this ties also into a question we got from the Q&A. It's from PSUT9FT, and he says, thanks for organizing. Question, how are international NGOs dealing with the war? Are they still operating well in Lebanon? Maybe I would like to pose it first to you, Jad, because I think you also mentioned already NGOs still trying to do their work, and you are, of course, you both work for an NGO initiatives also with international collaboration. So can you comment on this, how international NGOs are currently dealing with the war?
Okay, I have to mention that I was part of the crisis group in 2024, and I'm now following some of the of what they are doing. The NGOs are supporting and are just securing some of the needs of the displaced people, such as blankets, some food, some what do you call it? Things in order to be able to survive, but that's not enough. Regarding the international NGOs, they are trying to secure some of those needs. According to the domestic NGOs, they are trying to work more on the ground with the people, with the people, especially in the shelters, with the kids, with the women, with those who have special needs. So they are trying to work. They are trying to do a big job, but they aren't able to do that much because of the economic situation. Because Lebanon is facing a hard economic situation, and not all people are able to help. So they are just waiting for either the mother parties in order to give some money, or the international NGOs to put some money in this movement.
Yeah, I would want to echo a few of the things you're saying, because Lebanon has been facing a series of compounded crises, right? If we look at them chronologically, it started with the refugee crisis with the onset of the Syrian civil war, followed by an economic crisis in Lebanon, the Beirut port explosion, and then a couple of wars leading until now. If we put them all together, at some point there is a donor fatigue that we start witnessing, and international NGOs would mainly be relying on donor money. So I know that the flash appeal that was published to respond to the current crisis amounts to ballpark $300 million as an estimate of the immediate needs for only the upcoming 3 months. I think this shows you the scale of the devastation and need that has entailed from this war. So the question is just how much would international organizations actually be able to respond to this? A lot of it would be relying on donor money. And, there are also other crises in the world that donors are so interested in responding to. And there's over 10 years of compounded crises in Lebanon that donors have been responding to. So this is the point at which we are now. There are so many needs emerging, and the money just wouldn't come fast enough or be enough to be able to respond to the scale of the need at hand. So we know that under the Lebanese response plan, international organizations along with UN agencies have been responding as much as possible to the crisis. And we've also seen a lot of grassroots organizations and CSOs that are taking the initiative, relying on individual donors, going down to the ground, the field, and then addressing those needs themselves. It's a very beautiful movement that we're seeing of solidarity among Lebanese people and among grassroots organizations and people who are involved and want to help. But ultimately, you look at the scale of the destruction and the need, and I don't think there's something that could respond to it fast enough and adequately enough. So a lot of credit to international organizations and the effort that they are putting, but also there's something else in return, which is just the scale of the need that we are witnessing.
Yeah, thank you, Riva. I think Jada to answer to someone coming in, but it's important to hear, and also a brink of hope indeed of grassroots organizations, and that's of course in Lebanon, where there are so many small scale organizations, communities, people helping each other, that gives kind of a brink of hope amid such a horrible situation of war and violence. And
if I may, I think I'd like to add something. And this is a very personal experience of what the humanitarian situation is like in Lebanon. There are a lot of areas in Beirut in which you walk now, and people are staying in tents. And for context, Lebanon has been witnessing 3 weeks by now of very strong weather conditions. The thunderstorms, the rain outside, and these people are mainly located by the beachside in their tents, waiting for any kind of assistance that they can receive. There is an extent to which international and local organizations can respond to needs that does not cover the conditions of people staying outside in the cold who have to stay in Beirut because they want to stay close to home. Because sometimes during the day, if their homes have not been destroyed, but they're in evacuated areas, they would want to go back and make sure that everything is okay. Some of them go back to check up on their animals. There's a very human element to all of this where people want to stay close to home, but are unable to do anything about the overall situation because if there's an evacuation order, then they cannot stay in their regions. And those evacuation orders are covering entire areas. We're not talking about a street or two. It's about 4 or 5 sub-districts in the city. I mean, Jad might have a bit more, might be able to add a bit to this information, but sometimes you find entire parts of the city that are evacuated that are, I mean, I would say they amount to about half of Beirut or a bit less. I mean, it's a massive scale of displacement that, when people are staying in their tents in other areas, they're also just waiting to be able to go back home and try to get on with the daily things that they need to do. A whole month of the state of paralysis in the country. This is something that comes with a very heavy humanitarian toll that I'm trying to convey. And, I'm lucky enough by some weird lottery at birth that I happen to live in a region that is 10 minutes away from the targeted ones, but that just happens to be unaffected so far. So I'm relatively safe. I'm staying in a region that is considered safe, but anyone who has been to Beirut knows just how small the city is. Everything is nearby. And what I fall asleep to, the sound that I fall asleep to at night, the strikes that are quite loud, but that are in the distance, this is someone's entire life shattering and the loss of their families and belongings that is just 10 minutes away from where I am. This is all happening too quickly, too abruptly, on a large scale in a very small city.
Thank you, Riva, for this personal account. And indeed, in such a webinar as this, it's very difficult to convey the humanitarian and human toll of war and violence, and it's just horrible. It being so close and so much insecurity, and so thank you for telling us this. And I think this is also the reason why we wanted to organize this, but also to really keep the attention on the situation and what happened and is happening in Lebanon at the moment. So there's much attention needed for this, and I think this is also next thing we wanted to go towards. But maybe Jad, do you have something to add here, also on the humanitarian tool? But maybe also we also talked a bit about the solidarity among people, which is quite special to see and gives also a sense of hope. Is that something you have seen increasing in Lebanese society since 24, with people also helping each other and grassroots initiatives popping up? So hopefully you're able to unmute. Yeah, super.
Okay. We have to mention that many of the Lebanese are just showing some solidarity and trying to help through NGOs or everyone by himself. But we have to mention that other people are not showing that solidarity, and they are just telling that Hezbollah and their people must hold responsibility for what they have done. We do not have to forget that Israel is a crime state. They are just killing everyone in Gaza, and the West Bank, in Lebanon, in Syria, and the whole region. It's right that Hezbollah just holds the responsibility as Israel for opening this war, or for just going back to the wide war. But we do not have to forget that many people are innocent, and they do not hold any responsibility for what happened, and they just do not want war. They want to live peacefully. Many people are helping, are trying to help, but we have to speak more or to tell more about the international response regarding what's happening in Lebanon. First of all, there are no really diplomatic movements in order to stop the war, in order to go to a ceasefire. That's the first point. Second, we are not observing that big help from the international community in order to afford what is needed in Lebanon. There are just some countries that are sending some help, but it's not that enough. We have to mention that the war might be a long war. It might take more than weeks, more than months. It appears that it might be, or the Israelis are just saying that it's the last war with Hezbollah, so they might go into a very wide-scale war, into a very long war. So we have to secure what the displaced people need. We as Lebanese are trying. Some parties are really trying hard. The Progressive Socialist Party is trying very hard, and they have. And we have our crisis group that is working 24/7 on the ground, but that's not enough. We just need more help from the international community. We need serious diplomatic and political movements to just stop Israel from bombing the whole country, from invading the south. We just have to go to a ceasefire, and then we have to help people go back to their houses. Because I think even if the war just ended today, many people aren't able to go back to their homes because they have lost their homes. Everything in the south, from the Litani River to the borders, is just being damaged. So they have no places to go back. We have to stop this war right now. We have to stop the damage, the losses right now, and we have to secure some help for the people that are displaced.
Yeah, thank you, Jad. And you already went into a question I wanted to pose you indeed about what international community should do. And of course, international community is something quite pluriform at the moment, also very very much in disarray. We've also what's happening in the US, etc. But of course, us also coming from the Netherlands as a foundation, but with a lot of foundations also involved from European Union, European countries. You would indeed say that humanitarian support, but also clear diplomatic pressure is very much needed also from the EU and European side, if I understand correctly. And would you agree there, Riva, on that end?
Oh, of course, of course. I think this question would be multi-layered to address, because on one hand, the question would be the importance of nuance and progressive politics in somehow still being able to not fall into the binary trap of what is happening in Lebanon, but also the importance of advocacy and the international community vis-a-vis Lebanon in being able to somehow influence what is happening. So perhaps I would look at this question in terms of what actions can be taken by the international community, especially to be able to influence the situation and basically the dire extent to which we got to at this point of the war. I think if we start with the very basics, one point that I would say that the vast majority of Lebanese people would agree with me on is that Lebanon is not collateral damage in an Iran-Israel war. It is a country whose sovereignty has been continuously undermined, internally and externally. And that is the frame that should govern the policy debate. In practical terms, progressive actors should push for 4 or 5 points that I think are important. One, including Lebanon in any ceasefire diplomacy. The discussions, be it on the level of the US and Iran, or also to include Israel, we have to include Lebanon in any ceasefire discussions. We have to have an explicit rejection of any buffer zone or any annexation plan of any kind over Lebanese territories. The international community has to scrutinize and suspend any arms transfers. It is very important to support investigations into attacks on civilians and healthcare and Lebanese infrastructure. And that is very important to be led on and supported and endorsed by international actors. And to echo what Jad was saying, sustained humanitarian funding for Lebanon's public institutions and municipalities and displaced communities and international organizations operating in Lebanon. Because without that, the damage is just exacerbated. I mean, it doesn't really solve the situation, but perhaps it helps in putting a band-aid on it a little bit. It's been a pretty complicated conflict, and one in which it's been pretty hard maintaining nuance, because I think it's very easy to fall into the binary trap, justifying the actions of either party. And I think progressive politics is crucially important, especially in this phase, because we have to refuse these propaganda traps. The first trap is to treat Lebanon, the first propaganda trap, I mean, that we are witnessing, is one which treats Lebanon as nothing more than a Hezbollah front. And the second excuses Hezbollah's unilateral militarism because of Israel's violence, in a sense. So I think any serious progressive position has to be able to do both. We have to be able to name those who are responsible, but also condemning the strikes and the mass displacement and the attacks on civilian infrastructure and the territorial ambitions that have been very clear and all over the news. Lebanon's territory is 10,452 square kilometers. Let that be known and let that be remembered as we move forward in this war, because it looks like the public narrative of the ambitions of Israel is to change that number. And, when Russia annexed Crimea, the whole world was very fast in calling it an annexation, and basically calling it what it is. But then we watch it happen in Gaza. We watch it happen in the West Bank. And as we stand now, we watch it happen in Lebanon. And I wish the international community would give it the same attention now that it's happening into this region under the pretext of creating a security zone or a security buffer. As we stand here, we are a couple of activists, Jad and I, but so many more people are saying this. They're raising the alarms and the red flags, and they're saying, watch what is happening in Lebanon at the moment. It should not be on us to justify what is happening, but here we are, we're saying it, and there is a role for the international community to play, because something of this scale and this severity can only be stopped by the international community.
Yeah, thank you, Yuan. This very clear points, and yeah, of course, I fully agree. And I think also there's a role for just us as foundations in Europe and organizations in Europe to play, because we should also hold our governments accountable for not doing anything. And I think we saw in the Netherlands, for example, with huge demonstrations around the atrocities and all the crimes and genocide in Gaza, that this really helped, in a sense, to create urgency in our government, because 150, even 200,000 people, I think, even more, rallied in Amsterdam and The Hague. And also in other cities across Europe, this happened. And this is, I think, the only way that citizens and activists also across Europe can come together and show just and reject our governments supporting or sometimes not doing anything, and by not doing anything also supporting war in the Middle East in many different ways. So I think this is also just something we should do and can do. And I think also, as you also clearly state, that Lebanon should not be seen as some kind of collateral damage and not being at the table at all. And this has happened, I think, since 24 and also before, and that's a really key point. So thank you for that. Jad, do you have anything to add here? Because this is, of course, an important point. And maybe I also wanted to ask you additionally is, of course, in the European Union, there are also differences amongst the countries. And we've also saw the statements, and you probably as well, of the Spanish Prime Minister being very clear against the position also of the US inside NATO and of the European Union as well, vis-a-vis Israel. Is that a position you would say is helpful towards what is happening?
Okay. Regarding this point, I just have to mention one important point is that Lebanon is not the backyard of Iran, and Iran have to stop interfering in the Lebanese affairs. It just has to stop supporting Hezbollah through money or through military or whatever. We are not a card in the Iranians' proxy to just face Israel or whatever. If they have to face each other, let it be, but far from Lebanon. Lebanon is neither a backyard for Iran nor a land to annex for Israel. This is one point. The second point is that the European community is really helping. They are trying to donate, and they are they have their collaboration with some Lebanese NGOs or parties, and we as progressive youth organization, we have so many parties that we collaborate with in Europe. But we have to just it's not being enough. That's the first point. Europe and even I have to mention that the US must hold responsibility for what's happening in Lebanon and in the Middle East, because Israel is just supported by the US, and they are sending a lot of money to Israel to hit Lebanon and to annex the South. So the US must take its diplomatic, its political, and its economic and social responsibility. First of all, stop Israel from invading Lebanon and from bombing Lebanon. Second, trying to help the Lebanese authorities, the Lebanese non-governmental organizations, and even the Lebanese parties that they are working in this field in order to help people who are displaced and get their needs. So the US, through its organizations such as the USAID or whatever, they have to hold their responsibility of what's happening in the Middle East. They just cannot let Israel deal with or open its wars in Lebanon and in the whole region, and do not hold responsibility for for the collateral damage that will happen. So I would like to thank every European organization that's helping in Lebanon, but we need more help through Europe and through the US, diplomatic, political, and economical help.
Yeah, thank you, Jad. And we got a couple of more questions from the Q&A, so I'm also conscious of time. We have around 10 minutes left, so I will try to check the first one. It's coming from Maya van Doren asking, thank you for this webinar. What do you think are the main blind spots in media coverage of the current situation in Lebanon? Maybe Riwa, can I ask this one to you first?
First, I can answer this, but keep in mind that the kind of media that I am exposed to is primarily the local one, and then along with local activists. And sometimes it is only through my friend's account of the kind of news that they are getting on international media that I realize just how many blind spots there are. Just yesterday, actually, a friend of mine was saying that most of the attention is on the war in Iran, and I believe rightfully so, but to an extent that they really don't have an idea about much of what is happening in Beirut. On one hand, we wake up at 6 a.m. strikes. It turns out that people staying in those buildings were given evacuation notices at 4 a.m. while they were sleeping. Many of them did not evacuate, and then entire buildings are basically collapsing over their heads, right? And these are that's the severity of the kind of situation that we're enduring every day, and the international media wouldn't be covering much of that. I understand there's at some point certain points of interest, right? Or, there's a certain fatigue that can be experienced from focusing on too many things at once. And sometimes outlets would want to focus on a specific geographic area. But at the same time, what this is resulting in is a toll in Lebanon that is not really being conveyed. The daily violations of international law, right? The strikes on medical personnel, on just lost the word, but I'm thinking field staff, medical field staff, right? And right, these are explicit violations of international law. They're taking place almost every day. Along with the strikes at the bridges and the isolation of entire parts of Lebanon. I think if the severity of this was truly conveyed globally, there has to be some outrage that we should be able to witness. I mean, I think by any standards, if we were looking at this happening in any other country, the outrage would have already been so loud, it would have shaken the world. But perhaps there is something that is either related to fatigue from watching news in our region or the normalization of the extent of pain and suffering that the region has been enduring. Or maybe, I don't know, there are so many reasons. Maybe you guys could add to this, but I live on this side of the world where I experience this every day. And it doesn't make sense to me that the world is turning a blind eye. Maybe it is the responsibility of the media to convey this more, to really convey the humanness of the experience, that under this rubble, there are families, children. I think there's a humanness to the experience that has not only been taking place in Lebanon, but across the region. You know, I cannot talk about the war in Lebanon and not highlight what has been happening in Palestine for a couple of years, right? All of this, at some point, there is a blind eye by the world that has been taking place for too long, and people rely on media to be able to access these news. This is the responsibility of the media, not only with the news that they are relaying, but also how they phrase it. And there is a completely different narrative when we're talking about European countries, the war on Ukraine, versus the words, the lexicon that is used for people in the Middle East, right? People killed versus people dead. Takes land as buffer zones versus annexation. There is a responsibility in the words that we use and how well we can humanize the people so we can properly relay their experience. And it really feels sometimes as if we are less human in the way that we are portrayed in those news and in the words that are used and the severity of the situation that is conveyed.
Yeah, thank you, Riva. Very clear answer. Jad, do you have anything to add here?
No, she just mentioned the whole story, but I was just reading some American reports in the Crimea situation. They just said that that Russia is annexing Crimea, while in the south of Lebanon they are saying that Israel is controlling the south. No, it's annexation. They have just to mention that the casualties and the situation of displaced people. I think that many Western media is just blinding, or they are just aren't getting the whole story, or aren't writing the whole story.
Yeah, yeah, and that's indeed where that's a clear warning indeed to people following the news to be very, very cautious of indeed everything you see, and language is being used is so important. But also, in a sense, I would also say sometimes also it shows the importance also sometimes of social media. Of course, you have to be very careful with also much propaganda and imagery being on social media, but it also could be a source of direct information that people can also use to see what's happening directly. And I think this is also something where we also again saw among activists also throughout Europe that it also caused people to rally and to really see what's going on also inside the whole region, and indeed, for example, also in Palestine. So, but yeah, this is something to also keep our information as accountable as possible. So thanks for this. A second question we got from the chat is from what you're aware today. Maybe to pose it to you, Jad, are the Lebanese people united in how to tackle the current situation?
Yes, I was just talking about this point that many of the Lebanese people are just showing solidarity, are trying to help even with their own money. They are trying to help with the NGOs or by their parties. We as comrades in the Progressive Socialist Party are all now a crisis group in the mountain. We are helping all the displaced people, especially in the shelters and those who have no homes or no place to go. So there is solidarity, but on the other side, some of other people or other Lebanese aren't just showing enough solidarity. They are just blaming Hezbollah for involving Lebanon in the Iranian-Israeli war. I agree that Hezbollah just involved Lebanon in this war, and there is no responsibility for Lebanon. But we do not have to forget that there are many innocent people, there are many innocent kids, there are women, there are elder people that do not hold any responsibility for what Hezbollah did. So we have to show solidarity for displaced people. We have to help them. Far from our political opinion regarding Hezbollah and what they did, there are people that really need help. That's what we are talking about in the Progressive Socialist Party. That's what we are working on as comrades, and we hope that all the Lebanese just they have to know what's happening right now and the dangerous situation that those displaced people are suffering. And when the war ends, we can talk in politics, and we can blame Hezbollah, and we can take actions against Hezbollah.
Thanks, Jad. Riwa, do you have something to add to this
Not to what Jad was saying, but coincidentally, as we're speaking now, an evacuation alert was just issued. So this is just to support what I was saying a while ago. Let me just show you what those look like. It basically says residents of the following areas to evacuate. And these include حارة حريك، غبيري، ليلكي، حدث، برج البراجنة، تحويطة الغدير، شيح. Do you have an idea just how large these areas are? To evacuate them would be effectively to evacuate a third to a half of Beirut. Just to give you an idea that, sometimes the claim is that people are being given evacuation alerts ahead of time and that they can leave, and this is a form of preservation of human life. But when you look at the scale of the displacement, I mean, this isn't humanly possible. These result in the kind of traffic and such short notice to leave homes that it is simply humanly not feasible, right? So to witness this across the span of a whole month so far, as of yet, it's a bit less than a month, but there's also talk of this being a longer lasting war. And this is the human impact that I want to highlight. Sometimes to the news, it appears as if everything is being done the right way with evacuation alerts. It sounds almost too ethical. And then you look at what is actually happening on the ground, and it is dehumanizing to an extent that if there's one image that I would like to portray of this conflict, of this escalation, this war on Lebanon, it would be the human face that is associated to all of it and what the pain and suffering that entail look like. It's actually an interesting coincidence that the evacuation alert happened as we speak, just to show you just how large the scale of the displacement is and just how cheap human life is in that process.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing this, Riwa. And this evacuation alert is something you get like, is it like how is it being communicated to you? Is it via SMS, or how does this specifically work?
And via social media mostly.
Yeah,
People just follow X accounts of focal points who relay these evacuation orders.
Yeah, exactly. But that also shows that people that are also not that could not get that information, it's also in that sense very strange as well. And indeed, as you say, it's completely impossible with such big neighborhoods with hundreds of thousands of people living there to evacuate. But also, it's fully illegal to have this forced displacement of people. So, but indeed, like the judicial consequence and the illegality of stuff is the one thing, but also the human aspect. It shows why this is illegal. It's completely, the consequences of it are completely horrible. So, but thank you for sharing this. At the moment, we don't have any more questions in the chat, but and also I have no more from the questions I wanted to ask you. But maybe to finalize, is there something, Jad or Riwa, that you wanted to tell the audience in this webinar and you haven't had the opportunity to, and then this would be the moment, Jad?
No, I think that we just mentioned everything that we want to talk to. We have to just echo that we are facing crime wars, as you mentioned now, that forcing a large scale, just as Dahi, forcing the people to leave this large area is a crime war. You cannot force people to leave their houses and to displace them. So we are facing killing every day, displacement, bombing, destruction, separating the south of Lebanon, which is a third of Lebanon, from the whole country. Those are all crime wars, and the world must work against Israel and against Iran, making Lebanon as a backyard. Just cut the Iranian support for Hezbollah, and controlling or stopping the annexation of the south and the bombing of Lebanon every day.
Thank you.
And perhaps from my side, echoing this and adding the importance of the collective responsibility of every person in the world who watches and reads the news. Perhaps where I come from, a bit naive or ambitious, you might say, but I still believe that the power of the people united, they cannot be defeated. There is a responsibility that we have in adjusting and shifting the narrative to be able to make sure that what we are creating is better and more sustainable for the generations to come. We come from an entire history of wars. Sometimes it can be heartbreaking when I hear my own family talking about the wars that they have endured again and again, that they are just tired by now. And can you imagine what it's like for other countries, what it's like in Palestine, the kind of traumas that will be passed through the generations in every country that is enduring a war? And we, as a politically aware generation, we have a responsibility and an ability to start shifting the narrative and to engage in the kind of advocacy that can make a change. Right now, we're with you here in a webinar, and this is already more exposure, and it brings forth our narrative to people who might be watching this, who either might not be fully aware or who might be influenced by the opinions that we are sharing. But there's also a collective responsibility to share this voice wider and to understand that we do have a power of advocacy, and that following this webinar or following any awareness raising session that will be taking place, there are actions that need to take place to start shifting this narrative and to start taking collective actions that can make a difference.
Yeah, thank you. And I couldn't agree more, of course. It's something, of course, why we organize it to stand in solidarity with each other, but also these are the first steps to organize and to also hold our leaders accountable, also in the West, in Europe, in the Netherlands, that they cannot do. They should put fully what's happening in Lebanon and what's happening in the region under attention, and they should act to hold political leaders accountable that are pushing the world and pushing the region into war. So this is, I think, much more to be done. But for this moment, thank you so much, Jad and Riwa, for your openness and for being so candid, and for being available for this webinar. I think that has been very special, but also eye-opening to have you here amid this very difficult moment for you and for Lebanon. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you for having us.
And we'll surely keep in touch in the coming time. And please also take care with everything that's happening. And we'll definitely update each other in the coming months. Also for the audience, thank you so much for joining this webinar. And indeed, I think we've heard a lot here about the current situation in Lebanon, in southern Lebanon, but across the country, the humanitarian consequences, people standing in solidarity with each other, but also very much the international attention that's very much needed on the situation in Lebanon, next to a situation in the broader region, Lebanon not being any collateral damage here. I think the points from your side, Riva and Jad, were very clear. And also that's, I think, for our audience, but also us as foundations, an invitation to start working and to also hold our leaders in Netherlands accountable for this, and to start organizing in a way. And the first thing is indeed to stand in solidarity with each other, to organize from the grassroots. So in that sense, it has been really special to have this discussion and to talk with you. We'll keep in touch with each other. Thank you to the audience, and hopefully see you at the next webinar. Bye-bye.
Bye.